When a bilingual speaker switches effortlessly between languages mid-sentence, it appears seamless. Beneath the surface, this action triggers a surge of oxygen-rich blood across the prefrontal cortex, indicating an immediate recruitment of executive control. Speaking two languages requires the brain to actively suppress an opposing linguistic network in real time. The speaker is continuously filtering out interference at the scale of milliseconds. To measure this invisible cognitive load, researchers rely on functional near-infrared spectroscopy, or FNIRS. FNIRS tracks hemodynamic responses. By firing near-infrared light into the scalp, it maps specific blood oxygenation changes in the prefrontal cortex, revealing where the brain directs resources during speech perception. The resulting data shows that individuals exposed to a second language early in life, early age of acquisition bilinguals, do not process speech by mirroring the neural pathways of monolinguals. Instead, the bilingual brain relies on distinct resource allocation strategies to achieve processing parity, suggesting it is structurally organized for constant conflict resolution. To identify these strategies, researchers compared monolingual English speakers with early Spanish-English bilinguals across 4 conditions. Subjects listened to sentences divided into unmixed monolingual phrases and coat-mixed phrases combining both languages. Researchers isolated the exact millisecond auditory recognition occurs using a mechanism known as a gating task. The target word is fed to the subject in discrete 70-millisecond audio chunks. The subject's initial unconfirmed guess is recorded as the isolation point. The audio continues until they achieve 100% confidence, the recognition point. The gap between these is the change score. The change score represents the cognitive decision-making time required to verify the auditory input. A high change score indicates a heavy tax on working memory. A low change score demonstrates neural efficiency. Macro-level findings show that monolinguals and early bilinguals exhibit near parity in their general word recognition speeds. If measured strictly by the final identification of the word, the two groups appear neurologically identical. However, the data reveals that differences in bilingual cognition are located within the decision-making process captured by the change score. We can observe these differences by examining the FNIRS data recorded during the unmixed sentence conditions. In theory, neural activation should be highest for both groups when processing sentences entirely in their dominant L1 language. For monolinguals listening to unmixed English sentences, the FNIRS data reveals a specific pattern. Activation concentrates over the central medial prefrontal cortex, indicating monolinguals rely on high executive involvement. Compare this against the bilingual brain. Here, the activation shifts away from the medial center, distributing toward the lateral edges. Bilinguals utilize different prefrontal regions to process their dominant language compared to their monolingual counterparts. By utilizing this lateral distribution, the bilingual brain avoids funneling all phonetic processing through the MPFC, which prevents cognitive bottlenecks. Even in single-language environments, a monolingual brain and a bilingual brain utilize different neural architectures to achieve auditory comprehension. The differences in how the brain structures its processing can be traced to a phenomenon called phonotactic friction. Phonotactic friction is the neurological clash that occurs when the structural rules of two languages overlap or contradict one another in real time. This scatterplot of voice onset times illustrates the conflict. The data cluster for the English voiced consonant b overlaps the spatial territory of the Spanish voiceless consonant p. This acoustic overlap is so direct that it causes even monolingual speakers to experience decision-making delays and negative change scores when listening. Spanish-English bilinguals face an additional source of friction. English lacks vowels. The phonetic inventory of the Spanish language features tense vowels, but lacks vowels entirely. This creates cognitive ambiguity. When the bilingual brain hears an English lax vowel, the Spanish neural network attempts to categorize it as a tense vowel. Resolving this specific acoustic conflict requires executive intervention within milliseconds. The FNIRS data shows a spike in blood oxygenation, isolated in optode 4, the left lateral prefrontal cortex, exclusively when resolving these vowels. This targeted lateral spike stands in contrast to the broader medial activation seen in monolinguals. The data suggests that navigating these incompatible acoustic rules embedded within the sound itself creates a cognitive tax that persists even before language switching occurs. The full extent of this tax is visible in the code-mixed conditions, where a sentence begins in one language and ends in another. Traditional models suggest that switching language parameters mid-sentence should result in severe processing delays. However, in mixed sentences, bilinguals isolate English-voiced consonants at 7.70 milliseconds, while monolinguals require 13.30 milliseconds. Bilinguals achieve this speed advantage by leveraging their dual inventory to eliminate conflicting Spanish sounds from the candidate pool. But this rapid isolation is paired with a specific cognitive cost: elevated change scores. Despite guessing the word faster, bilinguals spend more time in the change score phase than monolinguals. This represents the period of intense working memory taxation required to verify the sudden language switch. The brain must actively suppress the non-target language network to finalize word recognition. The FNIRS data proves code mixing is a demanding act of executive suppression, resulting in a prolonged verification tax despite initial phonetic speed. This creates a cognitive paradox. Two distinct brain structures produce identical behavioral outputs using different neural mechanisms. Early age of acquisition exposure to a second language shifts the brain's phonetic processing architecture toward this lateralized model. The prefrontal cortex does not operate as a passive hard drive storing two languages in isolation. It functions as an active, highly specialized executive control network, constantly managing functional load. To match the speech perception parity of native monolinguals, the bilingual brain must maintain a constant state of background suppression. The bilingual brain is not merely two monolingual systems layered on top of one another. It is a system reconfigured for continuous acoustic conflict resolution.